Kara Leskew is the Chief Operating Officer of Amberwood Doors. Kara also was with us last time. She was sharing how their journey in 2009 resulted in a tremendous increase in throughput. But more importantly, in the last couple of years, Amberwood Doors has been focusing on how you continue to provide growth within the business. Would you help me welcome Kara Leskew from Amberwood Doors? Clicker's right up by there.
Well, wouldn't everyone like to increase their business by about 20% without increasing any overhead? Well, I have a really great story to tell you today because that's exactly what we've done at Amberwood Doors and just since the spring of this year. What's even more exciting is that on this journey that we've taken with using the methodologies, since 2009, we've actually, to that point, increased 50% in our factory without adding an additional person. So what I'd like to do today is share with you some of the things that we've done to make that happen. So let's start with a little bit of history here. In 2008, we had a very difficult business environment to deal with, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. We had about a 25% price cut that we had to take in order to be competitive in the market. And as an entrepreneur with a fairly young business, that was a pretty scary prospect to have to face. But luckily in my past, I'd been exposed to some of the theories that were in the goal. And I knew that if we did this, this was going to give us the best chance in order to be able to survive in the market that we had to deal with. So we went to a short 2-day course at Goldratt on TOC, Lean and Six Sigma. And from that, we started to bring back some of the ideas in order to fix our operating system. Unfortunately, we didn't feel that we had the time to figure it out on our own. So we actually brought in Goldratt to come in and do a 1-week drum buffer rope event. So that's not normally how things work in the SDIS model. Normally, you would start with the strategy piece. But because we were dealing with a situation where we needed to have results and we needed to have them now, our strategy was we need to get this fixed. We need to get drum buffer rope running, and we need to figure out how to put more throughput for our organization. So that was a tremendously successful implementation. So after a 25% price cut, we had sales increase of over 30%. So our net gain from our drum buffer rope implementation was about 55%. And we actually had, to that date in the company, our financially best year and one of the worst years in the economy that I've certainly seen in my lifetime. So once things were stabilized, we decided that now let's go and do things properly and go back and do the strategy piece. So in 2009, we sat down and marked out our strategic roadmap for the business and where we wanted it to go for the next 5 years, really. And then after that, we did the I and the S, the improve and the sustain. And for us, it's mostly been improve, 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 improve in order to deal with the amount of growth that we had. And just a little note there, as a result of this, Amberwood was just narrowly missed making, I think we're 102 fastest growing company in Canada in 2010. And there were only 6 manufacturing companies out of that to make the list. So that's a testament to how well this stuff works. So what is Amberwood? We are a custom wood door manufacturer. And we make very unique products. We make one at a time, and they're all different. So we make doors that are shaped, we make doors that are square, we make doors that are historically accurate and replicas. Some have custom carvings, moldings, wrought iron. We also do sort of patio and recreational doors and variation in size. We have some that are, I think the smallest one we've ever built was about 30 inches by 72 inches. It was a little balcony door. And the biggest one that we ever built, we're building it right now, and it is 323 inches long and 109 inches tall. And we're actually building it in sections. And we won't even be able to get a picture of this one because it's going on the back of a cottage overlooking a lake, and there's no way for us to get a picture of it, unfortunately. So a little bit more history about the company. Our production organization right now is currently in I-line, and there's just a section of one of the large doors that we make. So that's probably about 1/3 of that long length that would be 27 feet. So our goal this year was to increase our company by another 30%. And in order to do that, we needed obviously the manufacturing capacity to do that. The problem was our lead times were getting higher, and we needed a strategy to increase the capacity in our factory in order to be able to do that. And the problem is that because of our growth, we had the drum getting better, the drum getting better, the drum getting better, the drum getting better in order to put more and more and more out. And then what we ended up with was pretty much a level line. And we had an operation that was no longer subordinating to what we had picked as our strategic place for our drum or our constraint in our organization. And how did that show up? We had excess WIP. So I had WIP where I wasn't supposed to have any work in process in the factory. I had an operation where I had 8 days, that was 8 days behind what it should be doing, and it just kept backing up and backing up and backing up. So what do you do when you have problems like that? You start expediting. And then what does that do? It generally makes the problems worse. We had scrambling. We were arriving late on sites for customers, so if we were supposed to be there at 9:30 in the morning, we're scrambling back in the factory, putting a glass in, putting a lock on, and arriving there at 11 o'clock. So my installation crew is held up, and my customer is held up. And this is a pretty serious thing when people are spending the kind of money on the doors that we have. They're taking a day off work, they've canceled business meetings to be there, get pretty upset. We're also running a lot of overtime in order to accommodate this. So we had people coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning, staying till 8 o'clock at night in order to try and keep up. It was also limiting our capacity. So we weren't hitting the goals that we wanted to meet in order to meet what we had set as our financial goals as the company. And probably the worst one was frustrated staff. So it's really hard to keep people, they do the best that they can, but when they're always feeling that behind and that they can't keep up and they can't get on top, they start to get frustrated. And our business is only about quality. That's the only reason why someone's spending the money to have a product like this in their home. So it's got to be right and it's got to be the best. And we're compromising our ability to do that. So we analyzed our undesirable effect. And it was pretty simple. Our finishing system wasn't keeping up with our drum, which was this was the operation that was prior to it. So we have an I-line. It's pretty simple. We go through our milling process. We go through our shaping process, our assembly, which is our drum, and that's followed by our finishing area, our final assembly area, and then our delivery and/or installation. So we had some solutions that we could do for this in order to fix the problem. We could hire more people. So what's that going to do? Well, it's definitely going to increase my operating expense, most likely increase my throughput. Again, it's still a pretty risky business environment, not probably the solution that I really wanted to have the most. The second option I had was to buy more equipment. Again, the company was reasonably financially sound. I could have probably easily have gotten the loan, but personally I didn't feel comfortable doing that just in case the business environment changed because there was so much uncertainty. And again, who really wants to spend the money if you can find another option? So our last option was to improve or change our existing design. What's this going to do? Well, increase throughput, yes, definitely. And relatively no effect on either operating expense or investment. Pretty easy answer. So what we did is we chose to create enough capacity after the drum through doing an improve event that was going to give us the 30% that we needed in order to achieve our goals. So again, as I mentioned earlier, our finishing area was 8 days behind, and getting worse. And we did the bottom line improve event. So these are the steps that we took in order to go and resolve this issue and get us back to where we needed to be to achieve our goals. The first and most important thing that we did is that we chose to look at the system as a system and not the individual problems. And this is really key because when I explain the solution to you, we actually fixed the problem by not just looking at our finishing area and fixing that. What we actually did is we looked at the finishing area and the final assembly area together in order to resolve this issue. Because we figured out just by doing a quick analysis that our final assembly area was much more easy to gain capacity in than our finishing area. In fact, with our finishing area, if we wanted to gain capacity, we pretty much had to do another shift, which again goes back to which was not what we wanted to do. Our final assembly area, however, we did a quick study on it, and we realized that we were spending about 8 hours, man-hours, doing a final assembly. So pretty much a full shift just to do the work he had, and that didn't include any of the other things that you need to do during a day. We have a small shop, so these people would get interrupted to help load and unload a truck, do any other little things that need to be done in the shop, clean up and stuff like that. The next thing we did is we looked at our finishing area, and it was already just doing the basic work that it had to do running overtime. So we were doing 8 to 9 hours a week, just looking after the basics of what needed to be done there. So how we actually went about and approached this is we went to the final assembly area first. Because we said this area is an area there where we can gain some capacity pretty easily. And we started by documenting our as-is design. And I actually had a little video on this, and it was kind of actually too depressing to show. Because you don't want to admit that these things happen in your factory. And I sat there and watched it for about 4 times and said, well, maybe I can cut this part out and I can cut this part out. And I thought, you know what? This is just boring. No one wants to see this, and I can't stand watching it again. So it didn't make it here. But the thing is that this is the great thing about TOC and Lean Six Sigma and the proper integration of them, is that prior to us having this issue, there was absolutely nothing wrong with the way that department was running, because they were meeting the demand and they were running the system the way it was supposed to be run. So there was nothing to fix until we ran into the issue that they could no longer keep up. So what we did is we did document what was going on there. And as you know, we think we know what's going on in our factories and in our businesses and stuff, and then you sit down and you watch it and you realize it's entirely different than what you really thought it was. So we thought that this gentleman who was doing this job on his own needed help probably 3 to 4 times during the day. There were particular operations that he couldn't do by himself. He needed help with. And when we sat down and videotaped it, it was more like 25 or 27 times during the day that he had an operation that he couldn't do or that was very difficult to do on his own without getting help from other people. So that was a big revelation, and that actually became part of the solution of what we did in this area. The second thing we did was we reviewed all the logic of the current design for areas to target and improve. And of course, that was one of the things that we looked at, is that we have one person struggling to do what is really a 2-person job. We hadn't had a meeting with our staff, and we brought in both the finishing and the final assembly areas, as well as the plant manager, as well as the person who is responsible for purchasing, to go over everything that was going on in this area and to get people aligned. And for me, this is one of the biggest things that you really need to have in order to make any change successful, but especially something that's going to affect your factory. I'm lucky in the nature of the work that we have. My factory staff is extremely well educated compared to most, but at the same time, people see things from their own perspective. They're not seeing it from the whole. And we really had to get that buy-in early on that what they were doing was actually going to make their life better by doing things differently, and that it was going to relate to the whole and how it was going to do that. So that was a really important thing that we did. The next thing we did is we did the strategy, and we took the design as is, and then we figured out how we're going to move that to the future reality. And most of this we kind of did at a more senior level, but we were pulling people in that were actually going to be doing the job from time to time. And after that, we verified the logic with the staff, with the people that are actually doing the jobs. So we went through everything from, it wasn't, a huge, compared to some of the ones we've seen today, but we did have all the steps, and we went through and we said, now does this make sense, and what's this going to do, and what's that going to do? And we really addressed the concerns of the people before we started to implement and put anything in place. And then the final thing that we did is we did our bottom line improve event. And you'll see I have lean with question mark after it. That's because of the methodology. This methodology was being used in context of supporting the TOC drum buffer rope design. So we did this in final assembly first, and then we actually did a second event in my finishing area. So it's a pretty scary thing when you're 8 days behind to say, I'm going to shut my factory down or a section of it for 3 days, and we're going to rearrange stuff. And we had to make sure that we had the plans in place that we could accommodate our customers to the best of our ability while we did that. So some of the things we did. Our factory is pretty organized. It's pretty clean. We regularly have customers come and visit their doors while they're being built, so we consider that our whole factory, they do, our whole factory is really a showroom. So there wasn't a lot of stuff sitting around, but it wasn't always the right stuff in the right place. So one of the things we did, which you'll see in a picture coming down the road, was we built specialized carts. So prior to doing this event, we had, the traditional tool carts, the red ones, you pull the drawers out and stuff like that, which, and everyone had their own special tool case. This one's Fred's, he's got a padlock on it, and no one else can touch it, and probably sprayed it with some cayenne pepper or something, I don't know. And the first thing we did is we rearranged the areas. So we're also going from a one-person approach to a two-person approach in this area. So that's a new element that we're adding, that we need to be able to accommodate the two people working in the same area on the same product at the same time. And we also removed all unnecessary items. And my business partner, who's not here with me today, he's pretty anal about throwing things out and kind of goes through the factory on a regular basis. Why is that there? That shouldn't be there. Where should this go? And I was actually surprised that we could find things that had to be thrown out. I think we went through 2 dumpsters in a small area. So got rid of a lot of extra stuff. So this is what we did. So this is my final assembly area. You can see the little red tool cart there. Prior to, with one person working on it by themselves. So because our stuff is so big and so flexible and so different in size, we needed types of tools and things that could be very flexible. So you're working on a tiny little thing one day, you've got a giant door the next day. All of our stuff needed to be flexible. And this is what it looked like afterwards. So you can see the 2 little brown carts in the back. Those were custom designed carts that we made where instead of things being hidden, everything is out where it needs to be. On the one cart is all the tools that they need for the one type of operation, which is sort of all your drills and things like that to do all the more woodworking type things. So putting on locks, putting on hinges, putting on the sill, mounting wrought iron, stuff like that. The other one is exclusively for doing glass. So they have all the tools, the suction cups they need to pick the glass up, the Windex to clean it, any knives they need to cut silicone once it's installed. And so going from first to second in this area, we went from a total of 8 man-hours to 3 man-hours to accomplish this. So yeah. 8 man-hours to 3 man-hours. So I now have 2 people they start at 8 o'clock in the morning, well before first break. They're done in this area for the day on a typical type of thing, which frees us up to fix our problem. So now this is my finishing area prior to doing our bottom line improve event. So you can see we have the little carts and we have kind of stuff that's just kind of around everywhere. And off to the side here, which you can't see, we had two big yellow storage cabinets side by side, and that's where we stored all our chemicals. So, but we actually had two different kinds of chemicals for the different stages of what our process was, but they were all kept in the same place. And I have another video from this area too, which, I watched it at the end of a day on Friday, and I think I went straight to the bar after, because it's just him. You know, you do those little diagrams where they're walking back and forth. Well, I'm glad I didn't have a pedometer on him, because I probably would have been really upset, because all he did was walking back and forth and walking back and forth. But again, prior to having this issue, it really wasn't an issue because we were keeping up with demand. But now we could no longer keep up. We really had to fix this. So this is what we did after. The top picture is my final coat, all the things that you need for final coat, which we relate to the spray booth. So we have the spray finish that we use is stored in there. If we're doing a paint finish instead of a stain finish, it's stored in there. And all the things, the tubes, the mixing, everything's done at that table, because it all has to be done in the booth. But all the stuff prior to that needs to be done outside of the booth, the sanding and the staining, and all the tools and the things and the chemicals and the stain that's necessary for that are in the other booth, or in the other cabinet. So a quick summary of what we did at Amberwood Doors over the past 3 years relating to the SDIS model. So in 2008, we skipped S, did a tiny little S, and then went to design and activate. In 2009, we did our strategy piece, which we're still working on implementing. And 2010 and on, we've been in the improve and sustain. So what? Well, these are our results since we first started dealing with this methodology. So as you can see in the first quarter that's shown up here, that was the first quarter that we implemented drum buffer rope. And it kind of goes up fairly steep from there. Then we had a little bit of a seasonal dip, because that's pretty normal in our business. There just isn't as big a demand in the winter for construction products as there is in the summer. And then we built back up again, and then we did something interesting. I use interesting because other words might upset me. We hired someone who we thought could do the job. We couldn't find someone that was Jonah trained in the new TOC the way that we had done it at the size of facility that we were running. So we found the best thing that we thought possible is we found someone who was experienced in Lean and Six Sigma, because we thought, okay, we can teach them. Yeah, everyone's laughing now because they know what happened. I don't even have to tell the story. Well, we have a pretty small facility and we're pretty aware of what's going on, but despite that, he started to undo the system. He started to level load things. He started to do things that I didn't even understand because I don't have the level of knowledge that he had on Lean. But what happened was we started sliding backwards and our production dropped. And if this is probably one of the biggest lessons learned. I'm sure other people know it as well. But once you've got it in place and it's working, you need to make sure you do the right things to make it work. And unfortunately for us, one of the things to get it back on track is we had to let this gentleman go. And this had a two-prong impact on our business. The first was we had to go back and fix and rebuild all the things that he had undone on our drum buffer rope design. The problem is when you do it a second time, it's not as easy as the first time because you don't have the trust of the people. They were confused now. They're like, but we were doing it like this, and then you want us over here, and then you want us back over here again. So we had that issue to deal with. The other issue that we had that was pretty significant for our business is that when we let this person go, we had to take our president, who is actually one of the key salespeople in our company, to come in and start fixing the problem. So now not only have I lost on production, we've lost on the sales side as well. We have our best sales asset in the company working on a production problem. And as you can see, it took a long time We started it about 6 months before we actually started seeing the ramp up again, where production was stable enough. He could go back and start doing some more sales work and working more with the sales team. And then eventually we got back to where we were before. Then once we got to the place where we were before, we started to see it coming back to the level load. We did the bottom line improve, and then results went up again. So some of our accomplishments. Our final assembly time went from 8 man-hours down to 3 man-hours. Within 3 months, our final assembly department and our finishing department was caught up. So those eight days that we were behind, we caught that back up. Within 3 weeks, all deliveries were on time without any expediting. And our throughput increased 22% over the previous best, actually, with no additional people and with overtime reduced. So we completely eliminated our Saturdays, and we were down, I think we were running about, for those 2 departments, 80 hours total of overtime per week, and I think we're down to about 4 or 5 hours. Management's happy. That's it.
So I think one of the things that you were talking about is sometimes we don't talk a little bit about sustain, but you just highlighted it. If you bring people in from a different perspective, even though you've set the system up, they can undo everything and you require a different improvement. So the importance of sustain is assuming that they come into your system, they don't get it, that you have to really either orient them or find the right person. Very interesting.
I think we did a really solid orientation, and I personally take personal responsibility for that decision. I probably would never hire someone that wasn't previously Jonah trained for a manufacturing leadership role ever again. Yeah.
So the other thing that you talked a little bit about was the orientation of the people, and talk a little bit about that investment of time versus how that investment paid off in being able to accomplish things very quickly. Because you, as you describe your stories, spent a lot of time making sure people understood. They understood the as-is and the to-be. They understood the change. You did the prep time. How, kind of give us an idea of that time investment versus how it made the putting things into place go faster.
Well, it's really, we're lucky because we have a small organization. It really is part of our culture that we involve people in things. We have a lot of respect for their knowledge and their point of view. And just my experience in the past, before I started this company, it's very difficult to implement things if you don't have the people on side. And I think it's really respecting their intelligence and respecting their input, and really getting all those arrows going in the same direction before you try and go fast. I was a competitive athlete when I was younger, and one of the things my coach drilled into our heads always was do it right, then do it fast. Do it right, then do it fast. Because if you try to go fast without doing it right, you're just going to have a mess.
Great. Questions for Kira? Can we have the mics up here? Any questions? Y'all think those box lunches are going to be so much better. Well, would you help me thank Kira for her presentation regarding the woodwork? Very nice. Thank you.